Mesa is just 150 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border, a location where more than 5,000 migrants, of course, have their sights on. And today, the Mexican government, perhaps fearing retribution from President Trump, tried to block the group from crossing into the Mexico-Guatemala frontier. But as you can see here, the crowd broke down the gates and started streaming in. Police using pepper spray were able to finally stop the rest of the caravan, but not after many got through. Now, the Ingram angle spoke exclusively tonight with a Mexican official who told us the following. The migrants are using women, and some pregnant, and children at the front of this line in an effort to intimidate the Mexican police. So obviously they're not going to use force against women and children. And the same official relayed to us that there are currently 1,000 Mexican federales at its border with Guatemala. Reinforcements are being sent in as we speak. And the police are telling this source that many of the people inside the caravan grew violent today, injuring 6 to 7 Mexican police officers who themselves have no weapons except shields, and they do have some batons if things get bad, and tear gas. The official closed his conversation with the Ingram angle, saying following, we will not allow our country to be literally invaded from the south. It is critical now to take a stand, because if this model is the immigration model going forward, you will see a caravan of this size coming every week. So Mexico has its own interest in stopping these caravans from flying through Mexico. And now what you see right here is not from the caravan, but take a look at this video Fox News obtained. This is yesterday morning at 3:30 a.m. in Yuma, Arizona. Now you can see 4 different groups of illegals climbing over the border wall, dropping right into the United States. And as President Trump said last night, this could be the election of the caravan. And I wanted to bring in right now former House Speaker Newt Gengrich. Newt, thanks for being here tonight. A big night. Let's start with this caravan issue. The president said this could be the election of Kavanaugh and the caravan. Kavanaugh, we understand, because of fairness and due process, and men feel like they're being targeted unfairly. Why is this caravan issue important both to Mexico and, of course, to the United States?
Well, the caravan brings into vivid attention that the Feinstein open borders bill and that Speaker Pelosi's attitude about immigration are such big dangers to the country. The Gallup World Poll did a survey, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, there are 179 million people who would like to come to the U.S. 179 million.
Well, our country is 320 million, right?
That's to be over half the population. Right. And what we have to confront is exactly what that Mexican official said. If we're not prepared to stop this caravan, how big will the next one be? How many will there be? And I think this puts Democrats, frankly, in a very difficult box. They don't like to control the border. They don't like to stop immigration. In fact, Stacey Abrams, the Democratic candidate for governor of Georgia, said she regarded the undocumented and the documented as equal. So she's basically saying, if you get here illegally, you're part of her majority coalition. San Francisco's passed a rule that allows people here illegally to vote. So the Democrats are now caught in that as people watch this.
These are devastating images, Newt. Well, look at these images. They're devastating.
You talk about mobs versus jobs. You're seeing exactly the kind of mob behavior that the Democrats have led to.
About 2 blocks from here, Newt, there's a homeless shelter. Any given night, there are individuals outside waiting to get in. There are not enough beds. They're on the streets. They're destitute. Many of them former military. They're veterans, down on their luck, some with mental health issues, some not, some just down on their luck. A lot of, I think, Americans, and I noticed this on radio today, they give to various organizations, international organizations that help children in need, including in Central America, like Food for the Poor, all these great organizations. They say, look, we have a lot of problems here. We're compassionate people. We do not want to feel like we're bad people or horrible people because we don't want to say anyone who wants to come in can come in. But when you see these pictures, this is the proof of what no consequences for crossing into our country illegally will bring. These individuals, gosh, you can't even blame them. They know if they get a foothold into the United States, Newt, what happens?
Well, look, they're carrying the Honduras flag.
Right.
This is an invasion. This is an act of attacking the United States sovereignty. And the fact
right now, Mexico. And I want to thank the Mexican officials and the Mexican police who are putting their lives on the line and getting a lot of grief from leftist politicians who are happy to give Trump a pain in the you-know-what over this issue.
Well, I think actually this is the best Mexico's ever been.
Ever.
I attribute that to President Trump and Secretary Pompeo. But also, I think to the Mexican government beginning to realize that this is going to be a crisis. You can't have thousands and thousands and thousands of people decide to break the law and have any expectation that civilization is going to withstand it.
I want to hear from Mike Pompeo addressing the issue of women and children being used, Newt, as a type of human shield. Let's watch.
This is a large group of people. They are putting women and children in front of the caravan to use as shields as they make their way through. This is an organized effort to come through and violate the sovereignty of Mexico. And so all that we can to support the decisions that Mexico makes about how they're going to address this very serious and important issue to their country.
Newt, I think this is a major challenge, as you said, to the Democrat Party. They have embraced open borders. They have welcomed in low-skilled workers, low-wage workers, as have some Republicans. Let's be very clear about this over the years, because it keeps wages down, and a lot of businesses are happy with that. They get cheap labor, pay them cash. They don't complain. They live 10 in a house. And it's good for some of these construction work crews in D.C., most of them speaking Spanish, hardworking people. But nevertheless, it has hurt American industries, from landscaping to roofing to plumbing. The list goes on. I'm telling you, this is a mistake for the Democrats to embrace this. A huge mistake.
And I think the whole imagery that you now have these people, I mean, first of all, they're political activists. They're not refugees. They're political activists. You raised the question last week, which I keep raising on Twitter. Who's paying for all this? As you mentioned to me just before the show, this has gone from 3,000 to now we think 5,000 people. If it takes $7,000 a person, that's a $35 million project.
Huge.
Now, who's paying for it? And by the way, if it's an American group paying someone to come and break the law, that's called aiding and abetting, and that's a crime.
Yeah, the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church does get about $90 million. The Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, not quite so much, to resettle migrants in the United States. So a lot of the migrants that cross the border we can't keep them, we don't have any housing, are then dropped at bus depots. William Longinus at Fox did a great report on this yesterday. And then they're transported all across the United States, first in shelters paid for by the Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, other organizations. They do get an enormous amount of money to do this. So there's an interesting like revolving door of cash from the federal government to these NGOs and 501c3s. I want to play a soundbite from tonight. The president, Newt, talking about this very issue. Let's watch in Mesa.
Right now, as you know, Mexico is on their southern border, and they're fighting some bad people in that group. You know, you see the people come up and you listen to the fake news back there and you think they're all wonderful people, right? No, you think, I'm serious. You think they're all wonderful people. You got some bad people in those groups. You got some tough people in those groups. And I'll tell you what, this country doesn't want them, okay?
Yeah, and I think, again, America is a welcoming country. We love merit-based legal immigration, true refugees, a lot of Christians in the Middle East who have had a really hard time getting here. In Western Europeans try to get the visa lottery, which a lot of us want to get away with. Do away with. But Newt, he's right. America, they see that this has gotten totally out of control, and it's just a question of fairness at this point to the American worker.
Well, it's also a question of fairness to people who have obeyed the law. Remember, we accept more legal immigrants
1 million a year
than any other country in the world.
1 million.
So those folks have all obeyed the law. They look over here at somebody who's breaking the law, and I think there's a lot of resentment of why are these people being able to break the law.
Newt, this was Jen Psaki, of course, former Obama administration official, on CNN talking about job growth. Speaking of the midterms, I want to play this.
The job growth has been the case for 6 years. The job growth was actually better in the last year of the Obama presidency than it was in the first year of the Trump presidency. So he's benefiting from that. The reality is that a good economy is good for politics, for the person in charge.
It was better under Obama. Was manufacturing jobs?
Well, she had a better job under Obama. I think let's start with her. I mean, I think she had a better job.
It's a Friday night here. It's really fun.
No, you look, I mean, lowest African-American unemployment in history, lowest Latino unemployment in history. I think we're now have the lowest general unemployment since like 1969. It's pretty hard not to believe that President Trump and his policies have made a very positive impact. The only major economy that's growing right now is the United States. None of the others are growing. And I think that we're doing something right. But I also think it comes back to this question, you know, we want to be a country that is welcoming to people who want to become Americans. And we want to become a country that's welcoming to people who want to obey the law and play by the rules. And I think this whole notion of jobs versus mobs is real. And you've seen it here at home with Democratic mobs. You're seeing it now trying to come up from Guatemala with a mob. And this is a very serious question. And you've had some very strange comments. I mean, the senator from Virginia who said that we ought to be punching and fighting in the streets. The former attorney general said we ought to be kicking Republicans.
Hillary saying we can't be civil,
you know,
until we win again.
That's right. So there's a whole,
because they were so civil back then.
Right. So there's all that we need to recognize that people have got to take a deep breath and ask themselves, what kind of America do you want to live in? And do you really want to live in an America where mobs are going to come into your restaurant to drive you out of it? Is that really what you're comfortable with? If you are, then you ought to vote Democrat.
I'm begging them to do that to me, Newt. Beg it.
That'll be a great evening.
Bring it. That's all I can say. This is President Trump tonight speaking about what America ultimately over time turns into if this continues. Let's watch.
They will try to plunge our country into a nightmare of gridlock, poverty, and chaos. You know that. It's going to be a mess. Democrats want to raise your taxes, impose socialism on our country, turn us into a Venezuela, turn us into another Venezuela.
Now, Newt, is that just overstatement?
I don't think so. I think if you look at what the call, for example, the Democrats say they want to have universal health care for everybody. And in California, Gavin Newsom, the Democratic candidate for governor, says, and he would give it away to every illegal immigrant who showed up. Well, if word went out worldwide, get to California, they'll take care of your health care, the sheer cost of that would break the American system. And I think we need to understand, these are folks who don't have a clue about the real world. What they're focused on is power. They want power over you and me. They want power to define how we're allowed to behave. They know nothing about creating jobs and nothing about economic growth.
Well, the Democrats today are all up in arms because of President Trump's comments last night about the Gianforte, well, he's my kind of politician, body slamming the reporter. They're saying, well, this is at a time when Khashoggi was murdered at the consulate in Turkey, and the president is sending a terrible message about freedom of the press at a time where the press was attacked, obviously, in this murder.
Yes, and I think that the press will always be highly sensitive. You don't notice when we talk about how dangerous it gets, how often the press are prepared to say that it was the Republican whip, Steve Scalise, who was shot, that it has been Republicans recently in Nevada who've been beaten up, that it was a Republican headquarters in New York that Antifa destroyed. You don't see much understanding in the press about the level of oppression from the left.
Joaquin Castro, who's considered one of the shining bright lights in the Democrat Party, he's a congressman from San Antonio. He said this about Jared Kushner. Let's watch.
Let me get to the point that I think is most disturbing right now. The reporting that Jared Kushner may have, with U.S. intelligence, delivered a hit list, an enemies list, to the Crown Prince, to MBS in Saudi Arabia, and that the prince then may have acted on that, and one of the people that he took action against was Mr. Khashoggi.
So Jared Kushner basically ordered a hit?
That particular comment is insane, literally insane. The fact is, Khashoggi is a public figure. Everybody in Saudi Arabia knew who he was. The idea that an American had to call and say, oh, gosh, you may not have noticed this guy. I mean, you really have to wonder sometimes, are these people just living in some fantasy world with no connection with reality?